Severance, Season 2, Episode 2. Goodbye, Miss Selvig. Mark's Audi is self doubting the Gemma revelation. Helena feeling like the lost black sheep of the family. Dylan G is probably the one actually poor up there. Irving is maybe in contact with Dr. Rigabi. And Miss Cobel possibly ready to go nuclear against Lumen. We discuss it all next. Let's begin by talking about Mark S. We see the events pick up directly from season one's finale, but unfortunately for us, the audience, we get a roadblock. Mark S.'s revelation that his wife, Gemma, is alive is halted and played up as his Ini simply referring to his sister's baby, who they had just found after she was missing at the read along. But we can see there is just enough doubt on our characters' faces, which indicates to us that this issue will be revisited. My interpretation of it is that Mark doesn't want to reopen old wounds about his wife's tragic passing, and his sister Devon plays along for the moment because she sympathizes with him. Later in the episode, we see that Mark S. had this heated exchange with his sister at Pip's diner, which indicates that even further, he gets angry at his sister Devon for saying that Gemma's death also affected her, and she wants to get to the bottom of it. Mark is lashing out because he reads it as more of Devon's curiosity at play and her dislike of Lumen as much as it is her being affected by Gemma's death. And for that, being frustrated, he lashes out at her. One final point about Mark is that we see that he has not been reintegrated, as was a common theory. However, in the show's new opening sequence, we see lots of indication towards reintegration, with Mark's Ini and Audi self interacting with each other. If you compare that to season 1, they were equally split and separate entities. This episode shows us why Mark does make the decision to go back to work. He gets offered a 20% pay increase, but it's mostly because of him getting emotionally manipulated by Mulchek. You see, he needs that job to heal from the pain that he's feeling after the loss of his wife. And of course, the reason he decided to get severed in the first place was because of the loss of his wife. The one small issue I have with Mark's storyline here is that we see last season his character was on the verge of quitting after Dr. Regarby revealed to him the abuse taking place down in the seventh floor. So I'm wondering, why would he want to go back unless if it was specifically for his Ini finding the truth and also getting reintegrated so his Audi can figure out the truth as well. I didn't like this episode how Mark just folded emotionally and decided to go back to work. The next character is Dylan G. We learn a lot more about Dylan G's outie life. I've always wondered what was Dylan's motivation for taking a severed job. And we see here it's simply for financial reasons to provide for his family. We learn that Dylan has a wife and 3 kids, and he has a history of a bunch of short-term employment. We can see that after he gets fired, he's struggling to land a new job. He also gets discriminated against for being severed. Remember that Dylan's Audi is the only one of the 4 MDR employees that has no connection with his Ini. To him, it was just another day at the workplace when suddenly he's fired one night by Muchek. So him coming back to work or going back to work isn't surprising, especially considering his struggles on the outside. I just find it ironic how Dylan's Ini always thinks and imagines himself on the outside as being this rich, outgoing character when the truth is that he's actually struggling financially. So that joke about being poor in episode 1 really hits hard right now. Let's go to Irvin's character. We see that Irving is the most mysterious and fascinating character in this show. Well, he's Audi. When Milchek approaches his Audi, we already know based on what we've learned about Irving's research into the company that he would be the most distrusting of Milchek. So we see that he has to play it off in order not to give it away. We later see Irving's Audi at a payphone where he says to someone, "Why aren't you answering the phone? My Ini has gotten the message." We also see Burgess Audi in a car watching from a distance. My interpretation of this is that Irving is contacting Dr. Igabi, and if it is indeed Dr. Igabi, I'm just wondering how long before she introduces Audi Mark to Audi Irving. With the whole Bert G thing, I believe it's just misdirection. I don't believe he's actually in on anything. You have to remember that a mysterious character just showed up at his door the night before. So I'm guessing it's just a case of him being curious and following up. Maybe his character will come into play later on in the show. Um, because I believe he was able to tell by Irving's strange behavior that he's severed. I might be wrong in that theory, but I guess we'll see later on in that show. Helena. Helena gets a lot of screen time this episode. We see she gets scolded by her father for her Ini's behavior. And I take it as this is her father's way of saying that her Ini is actually showing her true nature of who she really is. And he's disappointed in that. We learn so much about Helena's character here. And at first, it is easy to look at her as an unsympathetic villain. But the more we learn and discover, you'll see Helena is like a child who is lost in the shadow of her father and family's wealth. You see, her father scolds her, treats her poorly. And what I've learned is that the only reason she underwent the severance procedure is to please her family by doing something that will publicly boost the company's image. But yet, she gets blamed when things go wrong. We see that she has to make a public apology video, and then she immediately has to go in damage control mode with Milchek. While scoring the video footage from the seventh floor, she is fascinated by her relationship with Marc, and she replays that kiss over and over. It's as if when she sees her Ini, she's seeing what is her true self, unburdened from the shackles of her family. She's seeing what she truly wants to be and what freedom truly is and what she longs for. I believe at some point in the show, she will go through a turning arc, a changing of the arc, and that will help her to fight her company from the outside. Milchek was in damage control in this episode, and once again, it's another splendid performance by the actor. He has to be brutal and harsh when firing Dylan and Irving by lying to them about their Inis. We see more of the manipulation by him telling Irving that he and his Ini are friends. We also see him emotionally manipulating Mark S into going back to work. In this episode, we learn that out of the employees, Mark is very critical to the work that they do and completing the Cold Harbor file. This indicates to me that Mark is directly in relation to them trying to create the memory of Egan. Gemma has a critical part to play. We see they're trying to possibly piece Gemma's memory or recreate the living memory and consciousness of Gemma. And the ultimate goal is to bring back here Egan, and that is an important step in towards doing so. That's why when Mark requests that the MDR workers come back, the board immediately gives in to that request. Milchek also has the task of putting together replacement MDR employees, and it shows them getting fired. So it answers the question of whether the employees from last week were real or not. Finally, Milchek has to then recruit the MDR workers on behest of the board. And of course, Dylan needs the job, and Irving willingly goes back to work because he wants to continue the investigation. We get introduced to Mr. Drummond, who seems like an upscale version of Grainer from season 1. He's a lot closer to the board and deals with matters strictly on the outside. He eavesdropped in on Mark and Devon's conversation at the diner, where it revealed that they both suspect something about Gemma's death. He does, however, hear Mark is having doubts about it, but he recognizes that the sister is persistent. Finally, we get to see Miss Cobel. Her interaction with Helena was very interesting. She is given an apology and reinstated back in the company, but to a different role and title. You can tell it's one of those positions of little importance but with a fancy name, and Miss Cobel obviously knows that. She tells Helena that the company fears her. Because of the information that got out at the gala and the company's reputation possibly at stake, Miss Cobel is someone they should be fearful of upsetting because of fear of her revealing information. The most interesting exchange in the show comes towards the ending when Mark's Audi runs into Miss Cobel. You can see that she's torn between revealing information to Mark about what happened and leaving him in the dark. This is mostly because of her now disdain for the company who had previously disrespected her by firing her. But I'm wondering whether there is some other connection between Mark and Miss Cobel. She is definitely an interesting character, which the show has a lot to explore of. So that was it for season 2, episode 2. Remember to hit a like, comment, subscribe. I'm new to this, so it would be a massive help. Later this week, I'm trying to probably upload some more theories this week, so I'll catch you in the next one.